Well, it's not quite time to stop and hop on the old treadmill and start running. We're still at the point where we're trying to think about things, slow down, contemplate, reflect, figure out how best to get into the market. A useful tool for doing that is the SWOT. That stands for Strength, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats. It's a common B-school, business school tool that they teach. So there's lots of information on SWOTs on the web that you can go locate. Here's how I think about SWOTs. Where are my strengths? Well, my strengths are the technology to begin with. Some technologies just have an intrinsic advantage. Look at LEDs. If I'm concerned about energy consumption, a light-emitting diode just draws less electricity than an incandescent light bulb or a fluorescent light bulb. Now, let's take another one. Take a refrigerator that cools to absolute zero. Obviously, you're not going to cool more. I've used this example before, but a regular refrigerator versus one that goes to absolute zero, if I'm trying to get as cold as possible, there's an absolute advantage there. Other strengths are the people, the team. Have they done this before? Do they know what they're doing? Is the researcher a famous researcher? In effect, does the researcher have name brand recognition that will draw people to the technology? So there's a variety of factors that go into strengths. The weaknesses are, does the company or the group commercializing the technology lack skills? For example, if they never commercialized anything before, if they're going in the United States, is English a second or a third language, so they don't speak or write well? Is it that the technology needs certain things in place in order to function efficiently, or it has certain limitations, and outside of those it can't be applied? So there's my weaknesses, things that are intrinsic and to the technology or otherwise under my control. Strengths and weaknesses are internal. I can control them. The risks, they're technical risks or firm-specific risks. I can throw money at them, solve the problems. Opportunities have to do with what the market is looking for, where the drivers are going. Maybe barriers have cropped up that stop my competition. Threats are things like my competition, market drivers that work against me, end user needs that are not aligned with where my technology is, so I have to stretch it. So threats and opportunities are external. They're things I don't have control over. Now, if I make a list of strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities, and I try and pick maybe 3 or 4 of the main ones in each category, if I make that list, then I can look at how it intersects in a matrix where I put strength, weakness, opportunity, threat, and in each cell that results, I'm going to say, what does that tell me about one of the 4 Ps? I can address more than one of the 4 Ps, the product, price, promote, or position, and place. I can address more than one in each cell, but by the time I'm done, I want to have addressed them all. In doing that, it provides a heuristic tool as I think out my launch tactics and helps me get to market. Let me give you a concrete example from a few years ago. We were looking at a new kind of fish farm for Arctic char. They wanted to use water that was coming out of coal methane in the Powder River Basin. That's an area in Wyoming where there's not a lot of water, and they were pumping water in the ground to push the methane out, and then the water comes out polluted. It's too expensive to clean the water, so you have to find a way to make it economical to clean that water so you can use it in a water scarce area. One way to do it is if you can use the water for something high value like fish farming, and in fact, after it gets done being cleaned and used for fish farming, the water has fish dung in it, fish poop, and it's good for fertilizer. So it has both fluid and fertilizer in it. Now, the person who developed it originally thought they were going to lease these or sell them to ranchers who would buy them and enthusiastically embrace fish farming. However, this person had never been on a cattle ranch. I used to work on cattle ranches up in Montana in the area called Three Forks, and let me tell you, cattle ranching's a little different than fish farming. The only fish we knew about was the kind you would go down to the creek or to the Gallatin Canyon, up to the Gallatin River, and you'd fly fish for the trout and you'd pull them out. We were not raising fish, we were raising cattle. So it's a totally different skill mix. And the other thing about the cattle business is it's very cyclical. So when you need the most supplemental income is when it's down, but that's when you have the least money to invest. When it's up, you're less interested in supplemental income. So you've got this cycle, so it makes it hard to introduce the technology there. Now, as I began to noodle this, I realized one thing that was wrong, and that was the business model. Because I couldn't figure out what the product was that would have the price, performance, ease of use mix, and the oomph that made it interesting. Because the customer, wanted people, the ranchers, to pay him money rather than give them money. But if you don't have money, how can you give it to them? Then I realized the trick is to lease it. So you start thinking, how do I lease these and what am I leasing? Well, actually, the person with the fish farm is leasing the water and leasing the land to set the fish farm on. But how does that become economically viable? Because then I can transfer money to the landowner and I can actually hire the landowner or the landowner's children or spouse or other people to help run the fish farm. So how can I make it viable to put a fish farm on a place, use the water there until the coal methane is exhausted and move it on? Noodled that for a while, and I thought I'll put it in containers, because I remember seeing these pictures of the military where they bring a hospital and they sort of in containers and they bolt it together, or a command center and they bolt together containers. Well, if you can do a hospital or a command center, you can do fish farm. So then I said, okay, you can bolt that together, so now I got that solution. I can figure out how I can get it on there. I can pay somebody to maintain it, give them an incentive where, you know, if they'll get a basic salary plus a piece of the take when the fish go to market. I need to aggregate, I need somebody who will aggregate, pick up all the fish from everywhere, aggregate them, drive them off to market, because I need a lot of fish to make it viable to get into the supply channels. And I need somebody to maintain the fish farms when they break, and my customer is not going to do that. So who's really going to run these fish farms? Who's going to be the real customer for this, the real target for this? Who's going to make it possible for the ranch to be the site where the end users use the fish farm? Thought about it for a while, and I needed somebody with money who was looking for money, that they, or rather with money who was looking for investments. What kind of investments? Well, investments, A, where you can make more money, but B, maybe investments where you could get some jobs out of it, like driving the trucks, setting up the fish farms, monitoring them remotely with all the computer hookups and that, and going out and fixing them when they break. And then I started to think, being a Westerner, who has the money out west for that kind of stuff? And it suddenly hit me. It was the tribes, because tribes run casinos for economic development. They use the money that they gain in the casino, and then they reinvest that to make jobs for their people and a better life for their people. So my real target was the tribe, who would then create a business that was a fish farm business, go around to the various ranchers, lease the land, hire the people to work the fish farm, plunk a fish farm down till the water's exhausted, pick it up, move it to another location. This upskills the people on the reservation, gives them higher paying jobs, everybody wins. It's a win-win-win all the way around. That's how you begin to noodle things using a SWOT. It's not that the SWOT is the end-all or the be-all, but it's a heuristic tool that you can use to identify problems and to start to think about, how do I get around those problems? My initial problem, remember, was I couldn't figure out how I could promote this, how I could position it, because nobody really wanted it. So I had to change the product. The product now wasn't a fish farm. The product was actually something, a lease opportunity, to lease your land, to lease your water. That's how I was going to reach that end user. It's a job. I'm selling you a job, basically, and some money for leasing your land. So you get to see how that works. Anyways, that's enough on this one. We're going to go off, and pretty soon we'll be ready to run.